So, how are things today?
Man, it's good. We are fast approaching, or depending on when you hear this, recently past Holy Week. We're trying to record this in a timely manner to make sure that it appears sometime around Easter.
Yes.
And that's a fun time for a lot of folks.
The most beloved of holidays for many Christians around the world, although most of them don't call it Easter. But maybe we'll talk. Maybe we'll talk about that one.
Well, we talked about it a year ago, if you'll recall.
Did we talk about it?
We talked about Pesach and
Pesach. There you go.
And the fact that it's Passover. Anyway, here's the thing about Easter. I find it very confusing. As a child, I always found it very confusing because there was joy and candy and fun and bunnies and a murder, a really important, horrific, painful, awful murder.
State violence. Yeah, state-sanctioned violence.
Which felt incongruous to me. I don't know about the rest of you all, but
well, I didn't know the word incongruous when I was a kid celebrating Easter. But,
no, I'm imposing that one on.
Okay.
I don't think that I knew that one either. But we're gonna. So at the beginning of this episode, we're gonna talk about Holy Week, sort of what happened, the timeline. Do the Gospels maybe do they not quite agree on a few things, and how does that work? And then you're gonna talk about resurrection. And not just Jesus' resurrection, but just the concept as a whole.
Yeah, where did this thing come from? How is it being worked into the Gospels? And yeah, we're going to get into it. Probably the most controversial episode that we'll ever have regarding the. I'm being sarcastic, just because the notion that the Gospels conflict on their timeline for the final week of Jesus' life probably shouldn't surprise anyone who has ever heard our voices before. But
let's get into it. I'm going to call. We'll just call this a chapter and verse as we dive into this. So, here's the thing. When I started to do some research about Holy Week and wanted a timeline, I just wanted to sort of understand the basic timeline and try to keep straight what each of the Gospels was doing.
Right.
All of the timelines that I found were on apologetic websites that didn't seem to think that there were ever any conflicts, and it was all very easy to track. And and then those same websites would be like, of course, the skeptics will say that blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah conflict, but that's not true because of all of our, all of X, Y, and Z apologetics. So what I decided to do was actually go to the website that they were most often citing as what the skeptics would say, which is the Skeptics Annotated Bible.
Okay.
And even I caught them out on a couple things that seemed like a bit of a stretch in terms of their contradictions, but some of them seem like important contradictions. So my thinking is we'll go through the timeline, and I'll bring a couple things up as we go that might be contradictions, or you can. And we start basically, don't we, with a story we've already told, which is Jesus riding two donkeys into Jerusalem.
Right. Whether this was one on top of the other, whether Jesus
the
was doing the old
pyramid
Zorro.
Has quickly become my favorite.
It's going to be canon pretty soon. I mean, once Zack Snyder gets a hold of it, that's going to be canon. So we'll have some lens flares. We'll have Jesus on two donkeys. So. And that is the triumphal entry.
Which, by the way, it sounded like you were, but you weren't just swearing under your breath. Because it sounds that if you mutter, Jesus on two donkeys, that doesn't necessarily sound, that is what, you were just talking about that.
So, in Disney movies, it will be cheese on two donkeys.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't know if you ever watched The Princess and the Frog, but there's one part where one of the characters is like getting upset and storms out of a church, and she goes, cheese and crackers. And I was like, that's like one of the most like transparent substitutions for what's considered profanity I've ever heard in a Disney movie.
That's somebody working on the script for that went to BYU. That's all.
I want to go just before the triumphal entry though, because we already have something that is a bit incongruous or incongruous if you're nasty. At the beginning of John 12, we have Jesus arriving in Bethany. Now, one thing to note about the difference between John and the Synoptics is Jesus' ministry is 1 year in the Synoptics. He's up in Galilee. He's you've got the evangelical triangle, these three main cities that he's operating within, and then it's kind of the on the way to Jerusalem road trip, and then he's in Jerusalem, and that's the last week, and then that's it. John actually has what seems to be a 3-year ministry, and John has Jesus arriving in Jerusalem and cleansing the temple in chapter 2, right
Whoa.
after the wedding in Cana. He goes down to Jerusalem to cleanse the temple.
Remind us quickly what the order that we think the Gospels were written in. John was the last one, right?
Well, it depends on where you put Luke, because Mark is almost universally agreed to be the earliest gospel.
Right.
It's the shortest. It's the one that doesn't include some of the things that seem to be expansions and innovations on the story that we find in Matthew and Luke, like the birth narrative. It's the one that doesn't even seem to have a post-resurrection story at all. We have one that's tacked on later. And then it's probably Matthew. Luke was probably written after Matthew and is reliant, some scholars think is reliant to some degree on Matthew as well as on Mark. We talked a little bit with Helen Bond about the possibility that Luke might be early 2nd century, that it might have been written after John, but most people put John somewhere in the mid-90s CE, so almost at the very end of the 1st century CE.
And why is John considered separate from the Synoptic Gospels?
Because the narrative is so different. Synoptics see together, you can line up the 3 Synoptic Gospels, and there's a lot of the narrative and a lot of the sayings are parallel. Or if they're not parallel, the same things are found in other parts of the narrative. So it seems clear that Matthew and Luke are reliant on Mark.
Right.
They also share things that are not in Mark. And so this is where the idea of Q comes from. That Q, which is a reference to the German word Quelle, which means source, is this other source that was not used by Mark that Matthew and Luke are sharing. And then Matthew and Luke also have their own stories that are not in Mark and are not shared between each other. And scholars will refer to Matthew's independent source as M, and they'll refer to Luke's independent source as L. So there's a complex relationship of all these things to each other. But probably Mark, Matthew, and then either Luke and John, or John then Luke. So
okay, got it. All right, so John has Jesus in Jerusalem way before the others.
Yeah, he gets baptized. So it's like, I got to hit this wedding, and then Moses on down to Jerusalem and cleanses the temple. And this is first year of his ministry, and he's going to be going back and forth between Jerusalem and Galilee a couple of times. But in John chapter 12, he shows up in Bethany for his 3rd trip to Jerusalem, and then he is anointed before the triumphal entry.
Oh, okay.
All the other anointings take place after the triumphal entry.
This is the anointing is a woman putting oil on his feet. Is that the thing, or am I thinking of something else?
Yeah, we actually have a couple of different things where, here what we have is somebody named Mary. Jesus is in Bethany. He's in Lazarus' house, which is different from the Synoptics as well, because in those he's in the house of some dude named Simon. And Mary shows up, and she's got a pound of this expensive ointment. Spikenard, I think is how it's translated in.
That is my favorite thing in the universe.
Yeah,
Spikenard.
And we usually translate anoint, but the Greek verb is not the normal verb for anoint there. So it's more like just cleaning or perfuming his feet, and wipes his feet with her hair. Right. And there are a few different things that are going on here. There's one, his feet have not been washed. She's just dumping this oil on his feet and then wiping the oil off. So it's almost like, let me get that for you. Let me just wipe that off. Okay, you should be good to go. And there's a parallel here between Mary kind of washing Jesus' feet with this expensive nard.
Got to get some good spikenard in there.
Yeah, sorry, I keep thinking of Monster Squad. Wolfman's got nards. And then later in the next chapter, Jesus is going to wash the feet of his disciples.
Right.
And so you've got Jesus' feet don't need to be washed because he's already pure. He's not sinful. But this is taking the place of the anointing that happens later on in the other Gospels.
If I remember correctly, when we spoke to Elizabeth Schrader-Pulser many moons ago, she said that her theory is that the Mary that does all of this is Mary Magdalene. Is that right?
She is. I don't remember if we talked about John 12.
I think we did.
Did we? Okay.
In Lazarus' house. I think she was claiming. She was saying that her research says that it could be that was Mary Magdalene.
Yeah, I think I remember that. There is now in Luke, you have this. Let me pull up the chapter this happens in Luke 7, I believe it is. He's eating. A woman in the city, which was a sinner, having learned that he was eating in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster jar of ointment. She stood behind him at his feet, weeping, and began to bathe his feet with her tears, and to dry them with her hair, kissing his feet, and anointing them with ointment. And again, that's a different word for anoint. And what's interesting here is that sinful woman is not identified. It's not Mary, but the beginning of chapter 8, it's going to talk about Mary as a woman out of whom Jesus cast 7 devils. But this is actually where we get the idea that Mary Magdalene was a sex worker.
Right.
Because we have Ephraim the Syrian in the 4th century who conflates the two, and then Pope Gregory the Great in 591 CE gives this homily and says that, in fact, I think I have exactly what he said. Yeah, she whom Luke calls the sinful woman, whom John calls Mary. So Gregory is conflating Luke 7 with John 12. We believe to be Mary from whom 7 devils were ejected, according to Mark. So now we're taking the unnamed woman in Luke 7, the Mary who anoints Jesus' feet in John 12, and then the Mary from whom Jesus cast 7 devils is Mary Magdalene from Mark, and I think is also mentioned in Luke 8. And what did these 7 devils signify, if not all the vices? It is clear, brothers, that the woman previously used the unguent to perfume her flesh in forbidden acts.
Oh, wow.
What she therefore displayed more scandalously, she was now offering to God in a more praiseworthy manner. So,
you look, when you have 1 vial of ointment or unction or whatever,
you got a pound of it. You got
you got to use it for all the purposes. You got if it's your lube, it's also the thing that you wash your Savior's feet with. It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's keep going with the story here.
With the story, yeah.
We got a whole week to get through.
Oh gosh. That's
we look. We're not going to get through all of it, but there will be other Easters, guys. We'll get back to it.
So that brings us to the triumphal entry, and we've already gone through some of the differences with the triumphal entry. But this happens on Sunday, and this is Palm Sunday.
Right.
So why do we call it Palm Sunday? Well, because they were waving palm fronds, palm branches, in celebration of the triumphal entry of their king, who was just sitting on his ass.
Honey, he's coming. Go get some leaves.
That's an O'Brien Regan bit. Get some leaves.
Get some leaves. Oh my God. All right. Okay, so he makes it in, and now we have another timeline issue. You said that John cleansed the temple. John had him cleansing the temple way back in chapter 2.
Right.
Now we've got Luke saying that basically not having any time between the triumphal entry and the cleansing of the temple.
Yeah, it seems like Luke comes into the city, and then he's like, he made his way over to the temple, and then he starts beating people.
Flipping tables and...
Yeah, flipping tables and gently letting the birds go, but...
yeah, exactly.
I'm here to set some birds free and to kick some ass, and I'm all out of birds.
That's right.
He's and according to Luke, that seems to happen on Sunday. He's not being very clear. Right. In fact, right after the cleansing of the temple, it just says and he was in the temple a bunch, and not being clear about what day these things are happening.
But definitely makes it sound like it's that day.
Yeah. There's no narrative break. It's just he's triumphal entry. He makes his way to the temple, and then he drives out the money changers. The other 2 synoptic authors, however, explicitly put this on the next day.
Right. So he cleanses the temple. That's a good day.
And the cursing of the fig tree also is something that is not in Luke. It is in Matthew and Mark, and I don't know if that has something to do with why they put it on the next day. But that's something.
That's right. That's another thing that we talked about on an earlier episode.
Yeah.
So great.
Oh, and also home base here seems to be Bethany.
Okay, so that's just outside of Jerusalem.
So it's outside of the city. So on the east side of Jerusalem, you got this valley, the Kidron Valley, and then you have the Mount of Olives. And the Mount of Olives is pretty big. And if you go up kind of the middle to the south end of the Mount of Olives and keep going east, kind of on the back slope of the Mount of Olives, you've got Bethany. And so he's just outside the city, or as what did the comedian say who talked about the fig tree? Like when you fly into a place, you just stay at the Ramada by the airport. You don't go downtown to stay. So so Bethany is where he returns to in the evenings, and that is, I believe, across all 4 Gospels. John has him arriving in Bethany, staying with Lazarus, and the others have him in Bethany, spending the night with Simon, I think. So on Tuesday, we also have what most folks refer to as temple controversies, but we also have what's called the Olivet Discourse on the return to Bethany. So they're heading back to the hotel, and Jesus is talking about the second coming, basically, and this is in the 3 synoptic gospels, and this is where we get the Son of Man will be like this. There's one standing in the field, one will be taken, one will be left. Son of Man coming in the clouds of glory, and all that imagery. But this is not in John has another spot where he sprinkles some discourse in, which I think is funny. It's actually after the Last Supper. But Jesus is, they finish the Last Supper, and he goes, well, let's get out of here. And then there are 3 chapters of Jesus lecturing them. And then, so that's like I think it's the end of chapter 14. He says, arise, let us go. And then it's not until chapter 18 that it's like, so they arose and they left.
Well, listen, if I was facing down what Jesus was facing down at that time, I'd probably dawdle a little bit myself. Yeah.
So a lot of scholars think that the discourse in there, which includes the intercessory prayer, was added or moved from another part of John or something like that. So, so we do have, the 4 Gospels don't always agree on when things happen, but it sounds like even John couldn't agree on when things were happening. Things were getting moved around. On Wednesday, Jesus continues to teach in the temple. The temple is kind of, he spends the night in Bethany, but during the day he's in the temple dropping knowledge. And we also get reports that now the Sanhedrin, the bad guys, are like, Jesus is in town. We need to exploit this opportunity.
Well, and every time he goes to the temple, he's just raising a ruckus. He's causing trouble. So.
And here's something that I brought up on some social media site recently that annoyed a lot of people, and it's something I've said before on TikTok. The reconstruction of the historical Jesus doesn't really have a role for the Sanhedrin in Jesus' death. It was probably the Romans who were like, somebody came in and drove a bunch of people out of the temple and started a small riot. Well, kill that guy. That's probably not all that went into
That's called disturbing the peace. That is not legal.
And this is the biggest festival celebration of the year in this giant city, capital city, where the Romans are always struggling to keep the peace. And so if anything put Jesus on the Romans' radar, it was making a whip and driving a bunch of people out of the Jewish temple and starting a small riot. And so from a critical historical Jesus point of view, that was probably what got him killed.
Right.
Now, when the gospel authors get a hold of it, you get this kind of trajectory from Mark, where the Jewish leaders are involved, all the way to John, where it was like Satan entered into them and they were all trying to plot, how are we going to get this Jesus killed? And you have different takes on Pilate, where Pilate's like, this man is innocent, but I will do whatever you tell me to, which is very clearly fiction, because the actual Pilate murdered Jewish citizens in Jerusalem by the handful whenever they annoyed him.
Right.
So the notion that they would get together and be like, we're going to tell on you, and he was like, okay, I'll do what you want, is just not historical.
Right.
And so it seems like the role of the Jewish leaders in this, and up to and including the notion that they all cried out with one voice saying, his blood will be on us. That's all fiction.
Right.
That is something that they made up to shift the blame to the Jewish people and off of the people who were probably actually responsible for his death, the Romans, those called Romans.
When you say they did this to shift the blame, you're talking about the authors of the Gospels?
Yeah, and this probably originated before they were actually committed to text. But the people who are curating the tradition, either as it was circulating orally or who were committing it to writing in the sources that may have been used by Mark and the other Gospel authors.
Do scholars believe that the reason to shift that blame from the Romans to the Jews was just as a means of separating Christianity, this new cult, from its Jewish roots? Was it, or why would they do that?
Not so much. I think probably part of it had to do with growing hostility between Jesus followers within Judaism and the rest of the movement. Probably some of it had to do with the fact that they were trying to get by in a Roman world, and so we're trying to.
So it's a bad look to be like, look, the Romans killed your god or whatever.
Yeah. And I think there were other rhetorical points to make about the Jewish folks who rejected their savior, that have kind of an anti-Semitic tinge to them.
Yeah.
And a wonderful book, I think, that discusses this to some degree is Bart Ehrman's book, Jesus Before the Gospels, which uses social memory to talk about how the presentation of Jesus' life and death in the Gospels could be serving certain interests within kind of the social memory of what happened. What is likely a gist memory versus what has been altered in order to serve the rhetorical goals of the authors and the communities. So yeah, that's something that is probably a literary creation. Is the Sanhedrin sitting there plotting how are we going to get Jesus murdered. But that starts on Wednesday, according to, that was their Hump Wednesday. Wednesday into Thursday, we're making preparations for the Passover, and then we have the Last Supper, which is in ye old upper room. And if you go to Jerusalem today, there's even a medieval-style upper room that they will take you through, and a lot of space in there. It would have been a pretty happening Last Supper if that's where it had actually happened. We have...
And the Last Supper itself was a Passover Seder.
It would have been a Passover meal, but the way they would have done it in the first century CE is not perfectly clear to us. But the way it's done today is quite different. So they didn't have a little matzah that they were passing around under the table to the kids to hide and this kind of thing. Those are much later developed traditions. But yeah, it would have been a traditional Passover meal. And then we have within the Synoptic Gospels, they're in Jerusalem. They go out, probably skirt around the south side of Jerusalem to go down the hill into the Kidron Valley and come up the other side to the western slope of the Mount of Olives to what is known as the Garden of Gethsemane, which refers to an oil press. And so these are olive trees that make up this garden. And we have Jesus praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. We don't have this prayer in John. Some people think that the intercessory prayer is kind of the Johannine substitute for the prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane. At which point, Jesus is arrested in the garden, which is something that is precipitated by the betrayal of Judas. And another interesting trajectory is with Judas. There's a theory that in Mark, there's not a presentation of Judas as a conniving backstabber. It says that he turned Jesus over, but the handed over verb is kind of morally neutral. Like it's not a negative, it's not inherently negative. And there's a theory that Judas had done this in the hopes that he would be setting up the confrontation that would catalyze Jesus's, hulking out and destroying the Romans. And then after he saw, oh no, that didn't work, he is distraught because he could have been trying to arrange the meeting to kick off the second coming. And it's in Matthew, Luke, and then John, where Judas is increasingly possessed by the devil to do this. So it's an interesting trajectory to see as Judas starts.
So Mark doesn't have him get paid for it. Mark doesn't have any of that stuff. Is that right?
There's definitely not. They don't mention Judas going and picking up money like we have in Matthew and in Luke/Acts.
Okay.
So yeah, it is something that it's just kind of like, and then Judas did this, and
they're like, hey, who's Jesus? And he's like, he's that guy. Oh, it's that one. Not necessarily a sort of.
Yeah. And there have been some interesting stories of. That brings up. There's one of the things that Jesus says on this last night. In Luke, we have him say, I sent you out without purse or script, and you guys did all right? And they're like, yeah. And then he says, well, now sell what you have and buy swords. Do you recall something in that area? And I've seen people recently appeal to that scripture as an indication that Christians need to be warriors. We got to go strapped.
It's the Jordan Peterson school of Christianity.
School of meekness, yeah.
Yes.
But what happens is and it says because he's to be numbered among the criminals or words to that effect. And then his followers say, hey, we got 2 swords right here. And he goes, that'll do. And it's kind of a weird head scratcher there. But then when he gets caught in the Garden of Gethsemane, they're there with the swords.
Right.
And so...
And one dude loses an ear. One poor guy loses an ear.
Oh, yeah, Malchus. And the idea seems to be that if he's going to be counted among the criminals, let's have him have these guys with their unauthorized weapons on them when the Roman authorities show up to pinch him. And so it's not saying...
Why? To what end? I'm not sure I understand what the purpose of that was.
So there's that prophecy. He will be counted among the transgressors or the criminals or something like that.
Okay.
And so the idea is, that fulfills that prophecy. that when the Romans show up, and it seems like an afterthought because it never really says. It's not like they try to fight off the Romans apart from just the ear thing. One guy
He's
gets
like, hey,
code,
you guys remember that prophecy? You better get swords. We don't want people to be confused.
And so that's the one passage people will appeal to. Like, see, Jesus is cool with us having AKs. But it's actually just Jesus saying, hey, we got to fulfill a prophecy. Make sure you got a sword laying around.
Wow.
So, and there are scholars who will say, oh, well, the disciples misunderstood. They didn't know what he was talking about with the swords. And Jesus was just like, you know what? Let's just drop it. Yeah. But I think that's historicizing the text a little bit too much. But that brings us to yon trial.
Yes.
Did you have any questions leading up to this?
No. Should I? Now I feel like I'm supposed to. Let's talk about the trial. I mean, so we've got, start us in with what happens.
Okay. Well, we have a few different people that Jesus goes before, and these are different according to the different Gospels, because we have Annas, who is the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who used to be the high priest. So in John, he comes before Annas, then he goes before Caiaphas and part of the Sanhedrin, and then later comes back before the Sanhedrin and then goes to Pilate. According to, I think it's Luke, Pilate sends him to Herod, who then sends him back to Pilate. So yeah, it's kind of...
This all happens in one day?
Yeah, well, and it starts in like the middle of the night, so you can imagine somebody was like getting woken up and be like, I gotta put on my robe and go out and to see this guy. And yeah, we have Pilate interrogating him, and this is something that Bart Ehrman also points out in his book. There's in some of the accounts, Pilate like brings Jesus out to the crowd, and he's like, "This guy, you want me to kill this guy?" And then he like takes him back in, and then sentences him, and then he goes off and is crucified. And where did we get the account of everything that Pilate and Jesus said in their little private meeting in his office before he went off to get crucified? Because none of the disciples were anywhere near any of that, and there was no opportunity for Jesus to tell any of this story.
You haven't read Pilate's authorized biography?
They're actually they're in the late 19th century, and I've got to remember the name of this book. There were some people who published what they called the Acts of Pilate. Which they claimed were first-hand accounts of Pilate, but they were, they were very clearly 19th century compositions, and they're also strangely white supremacists. Like, because one of them's like,
he said, "Shocking no one."
Yeah, one of them describes Jesus' appearance. And it's like he saw them, and he had flowing golden hair and blue eyes and lighter colored skin, and then all the Jewish people around him were swarthy with dark hair.
Right.
He's this Aryan Adonis.
Right.
And it's just straight up white supremacist. But you have some of those in the late 19th century, and every now and then on social media you will have people trot out those accounts and be like, "See, we have accounts of what Jesus looked like."
All right, let's push through. We're already threatening our final. We might not be able to make it to our.
Well, we can talk a bit about resurrection as we get to the resurrection.
Sure. Mm-hmm. So he's pronounced guilty. We figured that out.
Yeah.
And sent away to the thing. And meanwhile, we've got Peter denying him along the way. Mm-hmm. And there's some question as to the number of cock crowings and
whether it's just once or 3 times.
Right. Fine. Let's keep going.
There's a big discrepancy, however, regarding when Jesus is crucified.
Okay.
Because the Synoptic Gospels describe him being crucified at 9, and then it says around noon the sun went down, and then around 3 p.m. that is when Jesus says Eli Eli lama sabachthani and all that kind of stuff. So we have a several-hour crucifixion, and in John, it actually says that they lead him out and crucify him at noon. So they are off by a handful of hours.
And that's a significant difference. It's not. It's not. It's not a game changer, but it does. I mean, if the sun, if we've got moments like the sun going dark at noon, it does seem like it's important to sort of keep some of these together.
Yeah, and then I've seen apologetic attempts to try to identify accounts from later Roman authors who are like, there was an eclipse this year, and they're like, that's the year that Jesus was crucified. And it's like, well, there cannot be an eclipse at the Passover, because the Passover is when the moon is on the other side of the earth from the sun.
Right.
So you can't really have an eclipse at that time. So
Interesting. Okay.
and also eclipses don't last for 3 hours.
Yours
Max 7 minutes. Did you say yours don't?
Yours don't. Yours don't. They had better eclipses back then.
I've been practicing.
Can we just briefly take a brief moment to talk about what the soldiers gave Jesus to drink?
Yeah, let's talk about that. We have the accounts are different.
Yeah, I've been playing
Yes.
2003
Mark is the
songs.
earliest, and I would say since this account is found in all the Gospels, they're probably drawing from Mark or from whatever source Mark was drawing from. But Mark is our earliest, and it just says somebody filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Let's see if Elijah." And then
I've got wine mingled with myrrh. Is that just a
what
James.
translation are we looking at? Hang on just a moment. Let me pull up the Greek. Okay, so
We're gonna have country.
we got
country
sponge
symbols.
and we got sour wine / vinegar. Let me look up this word here.
so I have
Oxos. Sour wine or wine vinegar is what it has in Mark.
in Mark? Okay.
Yes. Now let's Matthew 27:48,
So,
Okay. High school sucks.
and that one has I believe it has the same thing.
vinegar to drink. So this says okay. So I don't know what translation these guys are looking at. I'm gonna guess that they're in the KJV.
Oh, let me take a look. Filled it with vinegar. That's what it has for Matthew 27:48 in the KJV.
I've got. I'm looking at Matthew 27:34. Gave him vinegar.
Oh, they gave him
mingled with
vinegar
gall.
to drink mingled with gall.
I guess you get like a gigantic.
Yeah,
Which doesn't
that-
sound very nice.
No,
Spaghettios on clearance.
and but that just says
You get 100 crates.
that has enos, which is just wine. That's just the generic word for wine. So
Well,
that's just
weird.
wine mixed with gall. But that's not the stick one,
Right.
which gets interesting. And then we got John 19:29,
Are you gonna have any about like a lady?
and this is of all the Gospels, John is the least likely to be historical. It's writing the furthest away, maybe. It is also the one that's toying with things the most and seems to be based on entirely different sources.
But also
42,
seems like
okay,
the
what you got?
one that's best written. Like it's most interestingly
Yeah,
written.
it's-
It's like telling a much better story, but
Yeah.
Wait, you don't.
probably it's storytelling. Like more than the other thing.
And there we've got put a sponge full of oxos, so that sour wine again, on put it on hyssop.
You're getting old and
And
ugly now. How embarrassing.
it's a type of branch.
That's
It's like a bush
Right.
branch. And
I
gave
know
it to
you're
him to drink.
really worried
And I've
about
heard
how
people
you
say
look.
that this
That's
sounds
the
like
default opinion, which is already
the xylospongium or the tersoria.
feel better about that.
And for folks who have
It's not
visited
like, don't worry about that
ancient
shit at
Roman
all.
cities,
It's like, I
not
know you
anciently,
think
but have
you're
visited them today. They have
Or is that even
you have the
reasonable?
latrines, the public shared bathrooms.
Oh, yeah.
And
It's
there's a little
2003,
trough
you don't
kind of
got-
runs right in front of you. So if you're sitting down, it's down by your toes. And the xylospongium would be a sponge that was on the end of a stick, and you would take that stick and you'd splash it around in the water, and then you would clean yourself with it. And
Yikes.
so there have been people
Also, like,
who are arguing
like-
that this is what's going on.
That they gave him
couple of-
a poo stick.
That they gave him a poo
Actual
stick,
girl
and not
power
the kind you
songs,
throw
don't
under the
lie.
bridge and then
Right,
run to
yeah.
the other side of the bridge.
Not a
you
Winnie
heard that
the
right
Pooh.
when the words came out. You were like, "That sounds like Winnie the Pooh." So yeah, there's an argument for that, but that doesn't make much sense to me, particularly because of how the story changes. And some people say, well, they put vinegar on it to aid in antiseptic, whatever. But it's
Do your own shit.
wine, it's sour wine, or
No matter what, they were just trying to give him something gross as a sort of rude last thing, an insult.
yeah, and
It almost doesn't matter if it was poo or if it was like nasty vinegar wine or whatever. It's like you don't want to drink it. That's the
yeah, they're just making his final moments unpleasant. And then he gives up the ghost. We have the Aramaic Eli Eli lama sabachthani.
That's my God, why hast thou forsaken me?
Yeah.
Which he doesn't
Oh,
say in
yeah,
all of the
Eli,
Gospels,
Eli,
right?
I think it's in most of them, but probably not all of them. Yeah, because I think because the John, I don't think
my God,
wants
my
to
God,
have
why have you
Jesus
forsaken me?
asking God why he has been forsaken. Because for John, Jesus is the Word. They're united
Right.
in will and agency and all this kind of stuff. So you can't have that high Christological Jesus going like, "What's happening?" So
Why didn't you save me, Dad?
so after he's received the vinegar,
very different.
Jesus says, "It is finished," which
Right.
in the Greek is tetelestai,
Okay.
and it is done, and gives up the ghost.
And then, either he ascends to heaven? Question mark? Or he goes to hell? Or what happens to him in this moment? Because there's a lot of different stuff that can happen.
Yeah, we've got a story. It's reflected in Peter and elsewhere that he went to preach to the spirits in prison, and this could be part of the harrowing of hell, where Jesus descends into the underworld to the abode of the dead and frees the captives. It could be, if it is appealing to the Enochic tradition, it could be talking about the people who were in the days of Noah, and it could even be talking about angels potentially, because in the Enochic tradition, the angels are bound in the deep, dark places of the earth. And yeah, this is Jesus going down and basically making possible the salvation of the folks who died before Jesus' ministry.
And this is so this is after he dies, but before his resurrection.
Yeah.
So Peter has him going to the spirits in prison.
Right.
Luke has him. Verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise. He says to one of the other guys hanging with him,
Right.
which one would imagine means he's going to heaven? Question mark? What is that?
Yeah, we still don't have systematic ideas of what heaven and hell are like yet. That's something that gets developed after the New Testament is completed. But he says paradise here, and interestingly, you brought this up before we started recording, and we verified that this is the translation in the Septuagint of the Garden of Eden. That paradise, the paradise of Eden is what we have there. And so the idea could be something that didn't really make it into the later systematization of the concept of heaven. I don't think we do the author of Luke any justice to try to take that concept and then work it into all the other concepts of heaven that are expressed by all the other New Testament authors, and then kind of whittled down into something usable by early Christians. So
Yeah,
this
but
could
they're
be something-
using the same. This word paradise here is used in other places as a sort of a heaven stand-in place. But
Yeah, at least it's a better situation than the bad place.
better than here. Better than, I don't know where you can't. I don't know where you're going, but you can't stay here.
Can't stay here.
Let's see, and then, but then there's also another concept which is in John, who says after he comes back, "Touch me not, for I am not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren." So
Yeah.
in that case, he just stuck around.
And that could fit with the harrowing of hell that Jesus spent the one day and 2 nights at the all expenses paid trip to the underworld.
Right.
Or it could just mean I haven't ascended to my Father in bodily form yet. There's been a lot of debate about what on earth this means that she can't. Does it mean don't touch me? Does it mean don't grab me? Does it mean don't hold on permanently to me? You got to let me go. It's unclear from the text what exactly is going on, but there have been a lot of different attempts to explain that.
Yeah, you said something in the middle of that I think we need to touch on, which is how many days and nights was Jesus?
Yeah.
Because you hear the number 3 tossed around a lot, and yet it wasn't 3,
No, well, I mean,
or was it?
he so according to at least the synoptics, he gives up the ghost around 3 p.m. John doesn't really say exactly when he gives up the ghost, I don't think.
What do you mean?
But that is
Jesus
before
wasn't even
nightfall,
dead?
so that is
3
still
p.m. on
days.
Friday.
Friday,
According
right?
to certain
So
Gospels.
he dies on Friday before nightfall. The day
Right.
starts at nightfall within the Jewish tradition.
Okay.
So Friday night would have been part of Saturday.
Okay.
So so we have a full day. There is a full 24-hour period where he's gone, but he's only gone for a part of Friday, all of Saturday, and then a part of Sunday, because they come to the
2
tomb
days.
early Sunday morning,
Jesus is
and he's
only
already
dead for
gone.
2 days
That's a day and a half.
in the Gospel.
It- if we're going by 24-hour periods, yeah, it's a day and a half. Now, you know, if I fly to
Jesus was
like
not dead for
I was
3
on
days.
Monday, I flew to
It was a day and a
Kansas,
half.
Right.
and then I was in Kansas all day on Tuesday, and I flew home Wednesday evening. And so I would say if I said I spent 3 days in Kansas, now would it be like, hey, you spent 56 hours in Kansas? That's not 3 days. But I might be like, I was there for a day.
Right.
Like either of those.
It took up
work.
three of my days essentially.
Right.
Or
now
or-
there is a problem with this though, and that is that Jesus says this adulterous generation will get no sign from me, no sign, except for the sign of Jonah. And it says, just as Jonah was in the belly of the great fish for 3 days and 3 nights, so will the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights.
Okay.
So
Well, that is a problem.
yeah, so that's where, that's... How did you almost get the days right? I have approximate knowledge of many things. Some people will recognize that quote, but it's a good enough prophecy because it absolutely was not 3 nights.
Right.
That's
Okay.
black and
Well, and now we're at the point of talking about resurrection. So let's dive in quickly to resurrection as a concept. Where did this idea come from?
we don't really have anything. Well, we don't have much in the Hebrew Bible that could plausibly be connected with resurrection. We don't have anything that explicitly talks about a physical resurrection. In the earlier periods, once you die, your body was put in a tomb, and then once everything had gone except for the bones, your bones would be collected up. And in earlier periods, they would just be thrown in a deeper part of the tomb, and you would just become one of the ancestors, this mountain of bones, where you were indistinguishable and disarticulated, or you were put in an ossuary, a bone box, and had a name written on it, or not, and that was stuck in a smaller part of the tomb. There was no expectation of resurrection until we, probably because of the Greco-Roman period, we have ideas about reward and punishment in the afterlife developing. We probably have in that period ideas about resurrection. We have some hints in Daniel. We have Ezekiel, the Valley of the Dry Bones. The flesh comes back to them. And this is really about the restoration of the nation of Israel. But this is probably fodder for the development of a concept of resurrection. We have it mentioned in 2 Maccabees 7. Which is probably a mid to late 2nd century BCE text, where it mentions the mother and the 7 sons, and that they were, because they were righteous, they were looking forward to a better resurrection, but because Antiochus IV Epiphanes was wicked, he's going to be destroyed. So in an earlier period, it seems like resurrection was the reward, no resurrection was the punishment.
Right. Annihilation.
Yeah, annihilationism. Once we get to the New Testament, there seem to be 3 different concepts of post-mortem punishment. Annihilationism, temporary conscious torment, followed by annihilationism or eternal conscious torment. And we see those kind of sprinkled around the New Testament. Although Paul never refers to any of them explicitly, never refers to hell at all. Although does once and a half refer to people being destroyed. So might be annihilationism. But we have this concept of resurrection that is developing within Greco-Roman period Judaism, and it seems to be represented a couple different ways in the New Testament. And you also have people being brought back to life in the Hebrew Bible and elsewhere.
Okay.
But there's not a sense of you're immortal now. It's you were dead. Oop, okay, we're gonna hit the reset button.
You get a few more weeks, buddy.
Yeah, you're still mortal. You're still gonna get old and die. There are some folks who argue that the idea of the dying and rising God, the kind of cyclical go down to the underworld, come back thing, might have influenced the idea of resurrection. But it's something that's developing in the century or two prior to the New Testament. And then we have Jesus is the one who kind of kicks off the resurrection, except in Matthew, because when Jesus dies, tombs open and people rise up.
Right.
And
there's
just
like a little it's a dead man's party. Who could ask for more?
A little mini zombie apocalypse where
Yeah.
and it says that people were seen in the city and
Yeah, they're just wandering around the streets. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's cool.
Yeah, and nothing that we don't hear anything about whether they were now immortal, if this was because Jesus is supposed to be the first fruits of the resurrection, the first person to be resurrected. So
Right.
maybe it was just like, hey, what was the the Pixar movie Onward? Maybe it was just a you got 24 hours kind of deal, and but yeah. So the resurrection is kind of unclear, but it's crystallizing by the time of the New Testament, and it's in the periods following that we get. Along with the systematization of heaven, of hell, and of these other things. And I think it's important to note that the gospel authors, the other New Testament authors, they're mostly writing from their own point of view, and they have different ideas about all of this stuff. But what makes it necessary to consolidate it all, reconcile it all, harmonize it all, is when the New Testament comes together, and now we have one corpus, and we're considering it a single corpus, which is something that starts in the 2nd century and is really formalized in the 4th and 5th century. And now that we're looking at it all as inspired scripture, suddenly it's like, well, let's make sense of it all. And we have the apologists in the 2nd century who are trying to make the gospel intellectually palatable for the Greco-Roman elite, the intelligentsia. And so they're looking at this corpus like, this is a mess. We gotta get this organized. And that catalyzes this work of systematizing everything and taking all these disparate kind of incongruous pieces and trying to fit them together to make a single kind of systematic framework that can work. And that's what's going on between the 2nd and like the 4th and 5th centuries within Christianity. And that's why we have the ideas that we have now. It's not because, Matthew and Luke and Paul and John and James were all like, we agree on everything.
Right.
Because they didn't. They disagreed on a ton of stuff. But then you have Clement and Athanasius and Tertullian and all these other guys who are looking back and saying, well, if we think these people were all inspired, then we got to make them agree.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a necessity that drove the development of the concepts as we have them now. But in the New Testament, they all have different ideas about the resurrection, about post-mortem divine punishment, about all of these things.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that'll do it for the show. I think for our after party, for our patrons, we should go through a few more of the contradictions in the story, and we'll chat a bit about that. So if you want to become a patron who can actually hear that after party and hear bonus recordings of every week, you can join us over on patreon.com/DataOverDogma, which we would really appreciate you. The $10 a month and up category is what will get you the after party, but also you can just join us there for an ad-free version of every show and reach out to us. You can
Okay, hold on, I'm jumping the gun. So from
now, what's this one? I forget.
hello, and welcome back to A Bit Fruity, the show where we don't really care if you have sex in the United States Senate hearing room, because on the list of the most egregious humanitarian violations that take place in there, consensual gay sex isn't even making the top 50. So last week, someone on Instagram sent me this essay called Annoying Queer People Are Not Why We're Oppressed, which was about the way queer people police each other's behavior, casting out the weirdest and freakiest among us, and how we tend to cling to this belief that being less annoying, less flaming, less out and in people's faces will make it more likely that the rest of the world will stop discriminating against us. This mindset is one that I've at times adopted personally. It's one that I think about literally all the time. It's one that people online have used when they try to make the case that I and people like me are bad representations for the community because we're too flamboyant or something. And it's a topic, respectability politics, that I've wanted to dig into on this podcast since I started the show. So I reached out to the author, and today we are joined by Devin Price to talk about what it means to be the wrong type of queer person. Devin Price is an author of the books Unmasking Autism, Laziness Does Not Exist, and Unlearning Shame. Devin Price, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Matt. I'm so happy to have this conversation, and I'm so glad this is a problem that's been annoying other people as much as me.
I want to start today's episode by showing you an image. This is a meme that circulates the internet kind of a lot, and it usually gets a lot of traction. In this case, it was tweeted recently by a cisgender white gay man named Tyler, who's a conservative influencer on Twitter. He wrote the caption, "Know the difference. We are not the same." And it's a picture where it's split into two sections. On the left, it says LGB, and on the right, it says TQIA+. And over the LGB part, there is a photo of the recently out gay football player Carl Nassib. He's hot, punky, white, all-American looking dude. And then over the TQIA+, it is a picture of Jeffrey Marsh, who is a queer TikTok influencer who makes these tender TikToks that appeal to young people who don't have accepting parents, and they are visibly androgynous, wearing a dress and eye makeup and have facial hair. The way that you're supposed to read this image, right, is LGB people are, normal, and we're football players and we can pass in society, and we don't, push anyone's buttons. And then the TQIA+ people are freaks and we're flamboyant and we're cross-dressing and we're in your face. And there's an obvious connotation here with how you're meant to feel about each of these people. And so I want to get your reaction to this image.
God, it like reminds me of things that I used to hear as like a millennial who was like coming up during like the gay marriage fights of the early 2000s. The things people would say about like, I don't care if you're gay as long as you don't shove it in my face. Like that kind of messaging that is so tired, and you'll still sometimes hear. This idea that some people, just how they live and how they present is like shoving it in your face in some way. Because when people say things like that, they see being queer as so other that it feels in their face for somebody to just live. It's just so tired, because the reason that we even have people who are the more respectable, straight-laced, seeming out queer people today is because of the people who are willing to be the bold ones to kind of be in people's faces, the Jeffrey Marshes of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I skulk around conservative LGBT internet way more than I should, because it's a form of self-harm for me at a certain point. Something that happens a lot there is this like revisionist history where people will say the goal of the gay rights movement was to assimilate into society. And I'm like, which gay rights movement are we talking about? Not the one that I'm familiar with.
It's totally ahistorical. So before Pride parades, before Stonewall, there were these events every year put together mostly by white cis gay men called the Annual Reminder Parades. And they started in the 50s and 60s, and they were, again, very cis male, very white. They would wear suits, they were very subdued, and they would just like march calmly in the streets saying, this is what gay people look like, see, we're normal like you, accept us. And it didn't do anything. It didn't score any political victories. It wasn't until Stonewall and fighting against the cops and this really diverse coalition of sex workers and trans people and queer people and homeless people all fighting the police that we actually started to see any kind of social gains. So when people regurgitate that same logic now, so many decades later, it's just really sad.
How would you describe respectability politics?
I would say that respectability politics is the idea that if, as a member of a marginalized group, if you would only act correctly, you would somehow win the approval of the majority and no longer be oppressed. That it's on you as the individual to just somehow be the perfect type of queer person of color, whatever it is, to earn your right into assimilation.
The definition, according to Wikipedia, is the assimilation of LGBT or otherwise marginalized people based on sexuality or transgender status into a hegemonic and heteronormative society. This can be achieved by downplaying stereotypes or behaviors associated with homosexuality, for example, cross-dressing or flamboyant dressing, public displays of same-sex affection, or participating in cisgender heterosexual institutions. And there is a version of respectability politics, I feel like, in every marginalized group, and I feel like every marginalized community has their own like infighting about this, right?
Yeah, I think everybody internalizes that stigma, right, of what everyone from the outside says about your group, and you really don't want to live up to that stereotype, even though actually most of the time those stereotypes, there's nothing wrong with them, right? Like, what's the problem with being flaming? What's the problem with not wanting to get married, you know, and like having a million partners or whatever it is? We internalize that self-loathing, and then we hate anybody in our own group that reminds us of what we're the most embarrassed about ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like respectability politics, I mean, it's usually expressed, in my experience, on like through our judgment of people in our group, right? And so in this case, LGBT people who we don't want to be associated with. And so I feel like in queer communities, it's like this judgment that's levied against like very flaming and flamboyant gay men, or queer people who are in kink communities, fat queer people, sex workers, drag queens, non-binary people, people who use neo-pronouns, oftentimes autistic queer people. The list goes on.
There's almost this sense of like, if you're too frivolous, you don't deserve rights. That like queer rights are this very serious thing, and we're trying to get these legal protections and get plugged into the legal existing, you know, cisgender heterosexual system. But if you need a surgery that's like too weird of a surgery that we can't understand, or the way you present is unprofessional, you don't really need to do that, really, do you? Like, can't you quiet it down while we're in public? You're making us look bad.
You're making us look bad. That is kind of, okay, hold on, I'm jumping the gun. So from your essay, a quote that I took from your essay was, I don't think any of us literally believe that the more irritating a person is, the more of a pressing political threat they are. But we behave as if they do. We devote huge amounts of time to complaining about the types of queer people that irritate us and develop complex taxonomies for describing why they are so annoying and why defeating that annoyingness matters. I feel like that's the whole thing, what you just said, right? They're making us look bad. The cringy queer TikToker is giving queers a bad look. Drag queens being too in public, or people at kink festivals, or the Senate twink. Who we will get to. Like, they're making us look bad. That, as a thought process, is what we're going to attempt to unpack today, right? They're making us look bad. Who are they, and are they making us look bad? So we're going to look at a bunch of examples of that today and try to get to the bottom of this. Like, do we have to cast out weird queers? If we do, I'm first to go. So...
Uh-oh, most of us are pretty weird.
And that's the thing, too. It's like, when you start scraping back, like, okay, who doesn't belong to any of the groups that are considered weird? It's like literally just Pete Buttigieg.
And even he, like, is like, you know how he, like, edits his own Wikipedia to, like, list all of his, like, watches that he collects and stuff?
What?
This is a whole thing. Somebody did this whole investigation, and they proved that he was editing his own Wikipedia from, like, his like, professional office, and it, like, updated all of, he has, like, this watch fetish or whatever, or, you know, special interest. So even he's a freak, you know? Like, we're all, like, weird and pathetic and cringy in some way or the other. Like...
Some of us attend kink festivals, and some of us update our own Wikipedia pages to reflect our updated watch collections. And you know what? Good for Pete. Like, I like Pete more now.
Yeah, that's like his one redeeming personality.
Okay, so that's so funny. Because we're on a podcast that some people might be consuming through YouTube, I want to start with some YouTube-based examples, and I actually think especially towards younger people who are sort of maybe coming into their queerness or just coming into like politics in general, the first place where they learn to adopt this mindset of like, we need to cast out the weirdest among us so that us normal gays, or whatever that means, so that we look good for the rest of the world. There are people who devote their entire like careers in media to making content that feeds that explicit impulse. One of them is Blair White, who is someone who I think about a lot. Like, I don't know, actually all of the people on this list that I have, Blair White, Ariel Scarcella, Buck Angel, like, I wish I didn't think about them as much as I do, but I'm so fascinated by their ability to churn out the same video every single week for years on end. So what do you know about these people?
I remember when Ariel Scarcella first became like explicitly transphobic and people fighting against her, and she kind of pulled a J.K. Rowling a little bit where it was like, well, now that you criticized me, I'm going to be even more transmisogynistic.
Yeah.
See, won't that show you? And then, of course, Blair White has been the subject of so much complaints and speculation about like, do you even believe this stuff that you're saying all of the time? Like, and just that weird, just soulless career path of I'm going to make videos about cringy trans people while being a trans person, and like just how soul rotting that has to be. And then Buck Angel obviously has been the subject of many a controversy over the years, since the basically early 2000s when he outed one of the Wachowskis against their will, and has been basically dunking on other trans people to lift himself up, I guess, ever since.
Yeah, so these are all people who have ended up in the YouTube sphere. If you're listening, you might already know who they are. Blair White, I just collected like a collection of titles from her rich body of work online. Here are a few titles of recent YouTube videos. Okay, wait, also, yes, this is important to know. Blair White is a trans woman. She's very pretty, she's very feminine. So, okay, here's some titles. Mr. Beast's trans friend is a nightmare. The trans lesbians of Tinder are a big problem. Reacting to insane trans TikToks with Buck Angel. How TikTok is convincing teens they're trans and mentally ill. Okay. The truth about Dylan Mulvaney. Dylan Mulvaney, I'm so sorry, sister. The disturbing LGBTQ kids show needs to be stopped. It's the same video over and over and over again. And Ariel Scarcella too. She is a lesbian. She, for a long time, for years on YouTube, got her start making just like lesbian content. And then at some point started like wading into the waters of transphobia of like, I don't know, these trans people are doing a little too much and they're making us look bad as a queer community. And then she gets pushback for that. And instead of like reflecting, she just like jumps into the deep end. And now literally every video she makes is like trans craziness on woke TikTok. Da, 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 da. And they all get so many views. And it's just like, so, like I don't know. All I was interested in was like making a lot of Google AdSense revenue. I think that's like a really dependable way to do it.
People seem to just keep falling for it, and then it also gets the rage bait of us watching it because we hate it and because it hurts. It's like picking a scab.
What's interesting to me is less these people, because like I said, like we could debate until the sun comes up about like whether or not they actually believe what they're saying, or they're just doing it for like the endless amount of clicks that they know they will always get. But what's interesting to me is like, I think the fact that people tune into this type of content, and like all of the comments, I mean, there are thousands of comments on all of these videos being like, yeah, I can't believe that person really thinks they're trans when they're just a non-binary freak, and da-da-da. And it's all of these people who are like inside the queer community who so consciously want to push themselves away from other people in the queer community by like becoming the bully.
Kind of to one of your points, like a lot of kids watch this content, a lot of queer kids or people who are just questioning their identity or coming into themselves, newly out people. And it's almost like this stage, I think for a lot of us, of identity development where you're trying to figure out what kind of person can I be? You know, what am I allowed to be and what am I not allowed to be? And so a lot of really impressionable people or people who are in like a really vulnerable spot, they see this stuff and then they say, oh, I can't be like these blue-haired pronoun users. Like that's become such a thing that people literally do actually make decisions about what they do with their hair and their body based on not wanting to seem like the wrong kind of queer person. And then of course conservatives lap it up too. And it's like when we have these conversations, we're doing the work of conservatives for them by saying more and more people are realizing they're trans online. Like the implication of that video is being trans is supposed to be weird and rare and there shouldn't be a lot of us. You know, that's like the unspoken premise of a lot of this stuff. Like these messages discourage more people from being queer.
And it's like, why? We see this so much from inside of the queer community, right? Like this judgment calls made about who is really queer and who is not really queer. So many of these like Blair White, Buck Angel type videos, which we're gonna get to him in a second. Buck, don't go anywhere. I saw that tweet you wrote about me last week and it pissed me off, so you're included in the outline.
Oh, no.
Buck Angel does not like me, and that, my friends, is fine. There's so many of these videos, like, as a real trans person, I can say who all of these, like, fake trans people are who are not really part of the community. But cis queer people do this too, especially, I feel like, with bisexuals. There's, like, this delineation around, like, who is really bisexual and who hasn't, and, like, for as much progressive conversation as we have about no one owes anyone their dating or sexual history, we do this thing a lot where I feel like, especially towards bisexual women, where we're like, tell me which women you've slept with, or else, as far as I'm concerned, you're a straight woman.
I wonder if a lot of this stuff comes from, like, queer trauma and this idea of, you know, reproducing the abuse you went through, of, like, it was so hard for me, I had to fight so hard to transition, or I had to fight so hard and deal with overt homophobia every day. And so how dare you come waltzing in and you don't even want to get surgery, or you were in relationships where you were basically closeted and people didn't realize you were queer all your life. It must have been so easy for you, and now I'm gonna like, beat up on you. Even though that's not actually the case, right? Where being closeted or not being seen for who you are, or not having the freedom to explore who you are, that itself is a very traumatic thing that I think all queer people undergo. We're all made to suppress ourselves. So it's so counterproductive, and I think it really does just come from that place of resentment. of I suffered, so you have to suffer too. I had to work so hard to make myself pass. So why don't you even want to pass? That completely devalues the thing that's the most important thing to me. Like if you're Blair White, like, and so she lashes out at it. Or you were in a straight marriage for many years, and of course you were like quietly really unhappy and lonely, and detached from the queer community. Like it's not easy to be a closeted bisexual person. Actually, it's not easy with straight passing. But from the outside, we say, how dare you? You've got to walk down the street without being hate crimed or things like that.
Something that I think about a lot is like how we identify with our pain, and especially for queer people, how we define our queerness by the pain involved in our like coming out experiences and stuff. And I see that a lot. I mean, there's a lot of asexual discourse on Twitter around like, well, what oppression do you deal with for being asexual? Which, like, first of all, I don't even really understand, because do we not know about like corrective rape? Like that's a thing.
It's really infuriating to me, especially the asexual stuff, because so often, and the way bisexual women get treated, because the rest of us in the queer community will talk about how those groups aren't oppressed, and will never actually listen to the members of those groups when they try to speak up and say, I experience, like you said, corrective rape. I live in a world that's built all around marriage, and so if I don't connect to people romantically and I don't want to get married, I'm aromantic or whatever, I'm structurally excluded from a lot of economic benefits. Like, we just don't listen to them because we've already decided as a community, oh, they're annoying and they're just complaining about the smallest things, but they have it so easy. And I think it kind of still does come from, like, there's a tiny Blair White potentially in all of us that...
The Blair White within.
Yes, yeah, you have to question the Blair White within. That and ask yourself, like, am I moralizing suffering? Like, do I think that my suffering makes me a better person? Because suffering doesn't make you a better person. It's just a horrible thing that happens to you, and it can rot inside of you and make you lash out at other people, or it can be something you choose to learn from, and a reason to empathize with people who struggle that's differently from your own. And again, I just keep coming back to that idea of, like, being erased and invisible and not even having the chance to figure out who you are because nobody around you's even heard of a demisexual before. That doesn't sound anything like privilege to me. Like, that sounds like the height of being disenfranchised. To not even know your own people or know that you can be who you are, that is like one of the most foundational queer traumas. And that happens to us whether we're trans or we're star gender or omnisexual or whatever else. Like, who's hurt by people finding a term that feels like home to them?
Who indeed? There is so much back and forth around like neo-pronouns and neo-labels. What do you think of that, right? There are so many people being like, okay, well, I'm fine with like he, him, she, her, maybe they, them. But the second you start doing this like zir, them stuff, or go by demisexual, or, any star gender, or like all of these words, which I gotta be honest, I haven't heard of half of these. Sometimes, especially when like very young queer people on TikTok are describing their gender and pronouns, like I've never heard of them either. But I try to fight back on the impulse to be like, well, oh my God, they're pushing this whole thing too far and they're going to rock the boat and I'm going to lose my rights as a result of this. Like, guys, come on.
When people say things like that, it's like they think those queer people are asking too much. And it's like they think acceptance is this like finite pie. And it's like, we can get being he, him, or she, her. But if you ask to be Z's and Zerd, oh, that's going to ruin it all for all of us. Because it's asking cishet people to do too much work. And the project of queerness, I think, is for us to just kind of like flip everything over on its head. Like we want people to rethink how they think about gender and sexuality and gender roles and roles in relationships. And so it seems like to me, the more and more people we have that are just doing things their own freaky queer way that we've never heard of before, that like helps really change the paradigm. That helps set all of us free. It's not a threat to us. If anything, the queer people that are more willing to be out there and do something that we've never heard of before, that is totally baffling, that makes us all question the like cishet conditioning that so much of us still have, even if we're in the queer community. There's a little bit of this discourse that happens in trans circles all the time, like passing versus like fuck passing, where a lot of trans people, especially trans women and men, they do want to seamlessly pass, if not as cis, but then as the gender that they identify as, because they want the safety of that, they want people to know how to treat them, and that's just true enough for them that that's the easiest way to move through the world. But there's also a lot of queer people who there is no such thing as passing as what they are, because society has like no conception of it yet. Like, for the most part, there is no passing as non-binary still for most people. Like, if you use they, them, or if you use z, zim, zer, you're pretty much going to have to correct people. You're going to have to assert yourself, or just tolerate people being wrong. And so you might seem like a more annoying queer person because you have to assert yourself, because there is no structure in place for you. We put like this weird onus on queer people, again, to like kind of ask, like, do I really need this? What do I need to make people understand about me? And I don't think we get to ever decide for someone else what they need and what's like a life and death, or even just like an important validating issue for them. And yeah, we get into a lot of trouble as a community when we act like, okay, being able to use a bathroom that aligns with your gender, that's important because it's so you won't die. But wearing an outfit that you feel comfortable in, if it's a little obnoxious, you don't really need that. You don't need that badly enough. That's not acceptable, or whatever the case may be.
I want to revisit Buck Angel really briefly. Buck Angel is he's a trans man. He is a former porn star. And my understanding is that his porn has been very influential.
I mean, I think it's introduced people to trans people. I remember in his porn, he used to call himself the man with the pussy, which, like, even that is kind of treating even himself as like a novelty. Like, he's the only guy with a pussy. That was how a lot of people got introduced to him.
Yeah, it worked for him. He got very famous in the porn industry. And now he's just like, I don't know, which is such a cool story, right? Like, you were a trans guy porn star in the early 2000s. And now he's just like, Blair White. Like, he's just doing conservative social media. Like, we have to stop the crazy woke TikTok teens from, like, making our community look too bad. Like, dude, whatever. All right, in preparing for this episode, I was going through all of these people's YouTube channels, and again, with him as well as the rest of them, it's the same video over and over again. Reacting to cringy queers on TikTok. Like, oh my god, you are like 40 fucking years old. You should not be reacting to cringy TikTok teens. You should be going to the theater. Anyway.
Yeah. Join the symphony. Get some culture. Love yourself.
One of his recent YouTube videos is called Delusional Trans TikTok, featuring fake trans people. Okay, Puck. But so I want to play just the first clip for you, and we will talk about it together. The first part of it is like the first TikTok that he opens the video with, and then his immediate reaction to it.
Being told that I can't identify as trans and also non-binary, being told that non-binary doesn't exist, being told that non-binary people are just ruining everything for trans people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to do some reactions on some weirdo TikToks. These people have lost their minds, it's so crazy. I mean, if you don't see mental illness, come on man, we gotta really just get it together. These kids need help, but I'm going to laugh at them anyway, I don't care. Because if you're stupid enough to put this on the internet, sorry, but you open the door for all of us to start making fun of you. Maybe if we make fun of you, you'll start to realize that whatever you think you're doing, it's actually damaging to you as well as to this community.
That's always the part of
Somebody
this
needs to
video
remind
where
him
it
that
fails.
being trans
You
was
think
considered a
this
mental
is
illness until a
starting
couple of years
to
ago.
become
That being gay was considered a mental illness. So if you're trying to say you're crazy for being a part of these groups, that's what's going to be said about all of us.
And has been said about all of us. All of our identities have been pathologized as mental illness at some point in the very recent history.
And also like, oh, you need help, so I'm going to just bully you. I'm going to just bully teens online. That's going to help them. That's going to protect the community.
Yeah.
How does scrutinizing that protect anyone?
Yeah, no, the only thing you're helping is once again, your Google AdSense account.
It just strikes me how like people like this, they cut off everyone in their own community so much that all they have left after they do that is to pander to the conservatives. Like that's the ultimate sadness of it. Like I think we can resent them for running this grift and making a living out of exposing like young teens. Like that's absolutely vile. But it's also just so pathetically sad that like there are very few places that the Ariel Scarcellas can go anymore, among other queer people. Like it's such a lonely existence, and they're just licking the boot of the cishet people now for the rest of their lives. Like that's all they can do because they're so isolated.
Yeah, and then whenever you say something to that effect, they'll always turn it around and be like, well, whatever happened to the tolerant left queer community? And they use it as further reason to like, well, I don't associate with the queer community anymore because I expressed some questions and now they don't want anything to do with me. And it's like, yeah, your questions were like fucking bullying 14-year-old non-binary kids on TikTok. Like, correct, I don't want anything to do with you. The only people who are ever saying, whatever happened to the tolerant left are like people who just are expressing the most vile viewpoints that I don't feel the need to tolerate. And also, just side note on like tolerance, my goal personally, and I won't speak for other queer people, I won't speak for people on the left, my goal is not uninhibited tolerance. And I don't know how you feel about this, but like my goal is liberation for my people.
Yeah, there's a big difference between tolerance and actual political gains where we actually have power. And I think that is where it breaks down, that a lot of these respectability politics, queer people, they want to just lobby for the straights to approve of us and tolerate us. They don't actually want us to have enough power to be a threat to the cishet system. And I think that's what a lot of us are actually gunning for, is for us to actually have the ability to change society in really dramatic ways and like reclaim our power. And yeah, that is more scary. So we actually don't need all the cishets to like us. It might actually be to our credit if sometimes they feel a little uncomfortable, a little scared, a little annoyed. Like that actually might be where our power lies.
So I think the examples we've looked at so far have been pretty straightforwardly just kind of bullying. And I think we're doing some good psychoanalysis of why that bullying can appeal to us, both as like the content creators of that, you know, Blair White, Ariel Scarcella, Black Angel, but also why it's interesting and sometimes feels good to view it. I want to go now into a little bit more of a complicated territory, and also one that I just have been wanting to talk about on this podcast forever. We've arrived, the Senate twink. Devin, what do you know about the Senate twink?
I know that he got caught or like exposed for having sex in like Senate chambers. I think he's an intern for a senator, and I guess people were scandalized by that, but I never understood what the big deal was. Like I thought it was cool.
I think more people should be having sex in federal buildings. In December, a few months ago, a video of, yes, this congressional staffer, he's like a white gay twink in his 20s, soon to be known as the Senate twink. A video of him having sex with another man in U.S. Senate hearing room leaked online by the Daily Caller, which is a very far-right publication online. And it's just interesting that the fact that this boy's sex tape was leaked to the Daily Caller, like, I don't know, I always felt like that should have been more of a story. Like, it seemed vengeful, and there was some discussion about the fact that this was actually punishment for this congressional staffer's having held pro-Palestinian views, which is why the sex tape was leaked. I don't know the merit to all of that, and it also kind of strays from the point, but I do think how this video came to be was never enough of a conversation. But anyway, the people's reaction to this congressional staffer having gay sex in the U.S. Senate hearing room was explosive. It was like all anyone talked about for a week, and it really kind of dimmed the light of George Santos, which I do think, like, I think George Santos was pretty pissed about not being the most chaotic person in federal office for, for a little bit there.
He needs the attention at all times.
Yeah. What do you remember about how people reacted?
I remember seeing some of the like criticism happening on Twitter about it just being like really unprofessional, or like sometimes people wrap their homophobia now in like language of like consent in these weird ways, you know, where people are saying, oh, it's so inappropriate and dangerous to have sex in a public space. That gets lobbed at especially gay men a lot these days. So I saw a little bit of that kind of hand wringing where people are pretending to care about like propriety and consent and protecting other people. But it's like, you know, somebody having sex in an office after hours isn't actually hurting anyone. So let's be real. This is about them being gay and about queer sexuality making them uncomfortable.
I mean, we're getting into it. I already know people are in the comments being like, why do you have to defend like fucking in the government building, whatever. Okay, be patient with us. Let's take our time here a little bit. So this point, this twink was immediately canonized by some as, you know, a gay icon, right? Some people immediately were like, oh my god, this is so cunty. He was derided by most, I would say, within the community. This was very much an intra-community conversation. Like, I don't think that many straight people were talking about the Senate twink, but it felt like every gay person was. And the main thing that I saw over and over and over again was, this will set the community back. This makes us look bad. This Kansas Justice Horn on Twitter, wrote, in a perfect world, one's actions would only be their own and not reflective of the entire LGBTQ community. But we don't live in that perfect world. This will likely give our oppressors another tool to target us, especially LGBTQ folks in public service or those wanting to serve. What do you make of that?
It is just the worst flavor of respectability politics. There's something that I talk about in my most recent book, Unlearning Shame, about something called systemic shame, which is this idea that we blame marginalized individuals for the problem of their own oppression, and we task them with like solving their own oppression. So every single thing you do as a queer person becomes a political symbol or a political statement. Like, you're never allowed to just be a human and just live and be flawed and messy and do dramatic things. And so I think it's kind of doing that, right? Like, it's putting the Senate twink or like any other gay person on this platform where, you know, we've been accused of being hypersexual perverts and dangerous for so long that if any single one of us is openly sexual, they get lobbed with all the blame. When, you know, they're going to call us hypersexual perverts for drag story time. You know, that's already happening. Like, you can do the most tame, family-friendly stuff, and you'll still get accused of being a pervert and dangerous and grooming children and all of this stuff. So it's just not reality to say that the Senate twink is what's setting us back. Like, we're already set back by a rising conservative movement. It's going to latch onto anything about us. So we have to own that stuff so that they can't use it against us.
We need to be having more sex in the Senate chamber, is what we're saying.
I do, because I kind of think that because the Senate doesn't have any respect for our bodies and what we do with our bodies as queer people. They're trying to legislate away our rights to transition, to have birth control, to have queer sex, to have queer relationships. So if they don't show any respect for our bodies and our sexuality, why would we show any respect to them? Like, I think kind of defiling it with our sexuality and messiness is what they deserve. And I think it's like a very, I mean, maybe saying somebody like fucking after hours isn't always a revolutionary act in their office. I'm gonna give it to him. Like, you know, if he wants to say it's a political statement, I think it's like actually it is, but in like a like very transgressive, revolutionary way.
I think when you zoom out a little bit and you look at the bigger picture here, it's like two men were having consensual sex in the room where millions of people are regularly stripped of human rights. I'm not so offended by this. I'm just not. But there was so much of that hand-wringing, right? Like, what did Justice Horn write? This will likely give our oppressors another tool to target us. There are like over 400 anti-trans bills going through state and federal governments last year. They are cracking down on trans people's right to play sports, use bathrooms. I know people are eyeing marriage equality from the right. Discrimination against us socially has become so normalized in the last 2 years. It's like, what tool are we handing them? I don't think any conservatives are waiting for us to hand them a tool. I don't think anyone saw this happen and was like, ah, yes, now my oppression of the gays is justified. Finally, I can begin to discriminate against them. Were Republicans on the precipice of being nicer to us?
Yeah, like if the burden is every queer person needs to act exactly perfect and be in this somehow perfect line of like family friendly, but not so family friendly that they'll call you a groomer, you know, like, and do everything right, and that's the only way that we're gonna have rights. That's impossible, and that's a burden that we can't put on a marginalized group. Like, if you only think that a group can find liberation if everybody in that group is an angel, you don't actually believe in the liberation of that group. People need to have the right, like in disability justice, we talk about the right to make mistakes. Like, if somebody is a human with full legal rights, they're allowed to be stupid and messy and impulsive and make mistakes, and they still have the same rights.
Yeah, and I'm curious what you make. I'm returning to this tweet because it really did encapsulate so much of the discourse. I'm curious what you make of what he said. In a perfect world, one's actions would only be their own and not reflective of the entire community, but we don't live in a perfect world. How would you push back on this, like, okay, I wish we lived in a world where we could make mistakes, but we don't?
I hate that logic that people often trot out of like, oh sure, you know, I wish the world worked differently, but this is how the world works, and so you need to just, you know, deal with it. Like, my counter to that is always like, what kind of world are we trying to build? Like, if we don't want to be in this world with these sets of rules of respectability politics, we have to be, like, as human beings, the ones to create it. I think if we say, yeah, so this twink had sex in the Senate chambers, and what about it? Like, that is how we help counter a lot of these conservative talking points. If we're not scared of them bringing this stuff up, then it isn't ammunition for them anymore. You know, we have a little bit of that power to say, we're not afraid of this. Our sexuality is beautiful, it's neutral, it's just a human thing that happens sometimes, and that doesn't have any bearing on whether or not we're human beings who deserve equal political representation as anybody else.
Whenever this stuff is happening, I think about the question I always ask myself, right? Is like, okay, if a heterosexual or cisgender person did this, would it reflect badly societally on all heterosexuals or all cisgender people? Like, would they all feel responsible for the greater perception of the community? If the answer is no, then it's no in this case too. And your anger at the Senate twink is misdirected. Like, I believe that. And look, I don't think you necessarily have to get a life-size poster of the Senate twink and put it on your bedroom wall. I'm going to do that because I think this twink is an icon. I'm not saying you have to do it. I'm not saying you have to approve of this person's actions. I'm not saying you have to go have sex in the Senate chamber as a revolutionary act. But you'd also be wrong in blaming him for the systemic oppression of queer people. Like, I understand it feels good to, because you're like, well, I would never behave that way, and I would never behave in a way so unbecoming of a sexual minority. But it's literally just incorrect blame. Like, the Senate twink isn't why there is a rampant anti-LGBTQ effort on the right of this country.
It's kind of that just world theory that people sometimes practice of, oh, I would never get assaulted because I don't dress that way. Like, oh, I will never be the victim of homophobia because I'm not being the bad kind of gay. It's like this illusion that we can control whether we're going to get targeted with our choices, because that is like very comforting to think. Like, oh, I'm the right kind of gay, I'm not the annoying kind, I'm not the like impropriety, like, you know, behaving kind, I'm gonna be safe. But actually, you're never gonna be safe. Like, they could target you at any time, and so we have to actually stand together against that, because it could happen and come for all of us eventually.
Yeah, wait, can you describe the just world theory? Because I think that applies really well here.
Yeah, so the just world theory in psychology is this idea that people believe that things happen for a good reason, that people deserve what happens to them. The most famous example is like victim blaming sexual assault survivors. So, you know, people who are too promiscuous, therefore who dress in a really slutty way, they're the ones who are more likely to get assaulted. Or, you know, people who are irresponsible and walk home alone late at night, those are the people that are victims of crime. People really believe those myths, even though, first of all, they're just like, it's just really a messed up morally belief system, but it's also just statistically not true. Like, things can happen to you no matter where you're sitting, no matter what choice you make. And even though it's comforting to say, I have control over what's gonna happen to me, and the world is just and right, I think if you're a marginalized person, you have to realize the world isn't just and right. Like, that's why we're fighting, because it's not.
I was reading back last night and getting ready for this episode some old discourse. I was dusting it off, some old Senate twink discourse, going through the archives, and I found this really great post on Tumblr from Tumblr user Marissa Tomei. Of course, Tumblr user Marissa Tomei has a good take on this. They wrote, there are rapists in the U.S. Supreme Court, and I'm supposed to clutch my pearls over two men having consensual sex in the Senate? Oh, heavens to Betsy. The first time sex acts have been committed in a government building. Are the shades of Congress to be thus polluted? But for the record, no amount of sanitizing your sex life or sanding down of your LGBT edges will make bigots accept you. So don't debase yourself by capitulating an inch to them, especially in ways that throw your fellow community members under the bus. That really resonated with me.
Yeah, it's beautiful. There's nothing sacred about the Senate. You know,
Nothing.
At a time when they're approving bills to just send as many weapons and as much funding to Israel to commit a genocide as possible, I can't speak for the Senate twink. As a staffer, that means he's probably like pretty like moderate liberal pilled, just because most people are who are working in the government. But I don't know him. But like, I think we should defile these. You know, it might not have been a political stance on his part, but I think we should defile these institutions because they're violent, they're homophobic, they're transphobic. There's nothing to respect about them. So why are we like trying to make ourselves be respectable inside of them?
Yeah. This video is getting demonetized. All of my videos get demonetized.
I'm sorry.
No. It's my goal. I think something that I do with myself at this point on this podcast is I see how many minutes into the show I can get before absolutely knowing that this video will not be monetized.
Did I need to use like a TikTokism? Like, what's the TikTok word for genocide?
No, what's the we should be having more segs in the Senate hearing room.
Yes.
We should be having more segs in the Senate hearing room where people are unalived. The last thing I want to say about the Senate twink, and this is kind of unrelated to anything, but I just think it was so camp. He issued an apology via LinkedIn. I think this is from LinkedIn based on the format of the screenshot, but the beginning of the apology reads as such. This has been a difficult time for me as I have been attacked for who I love to pursue a political agenda. While some of my actions in the past have shown poor judgment, I love my job and would never disrespect my workplace. Any attempts to characterize my actions otherwise are fabricated, and I will be exploring what legal options are available to me in these matters. And like, okay, I wish him luck in that legal recourse. I don't know what success he's gonna find, but I love the first sentence, as I have been attacked for who I love.
He really went for the like love is love,
Yeah.
like, which is like kind of a respectability politics thing, right? Like, it's very funny to take the talking point that like we used to use to like justify gay marriage, like it's not all a sex thing.
Totally.
It's about love. He's like, this is too also about love. Like
I don't actually think this boy ever meant to be like I don't think this was like a politically revolutionary act for him. Like, I think he just thought it was really hot, which I'm sure it was, and I'm happy for him in that. Like, I think he was like, I just really want to get fucked in the Senate chamber, and I love
Or maybe
that.
neither of them could host, you know? Maybe neither of them had a place to go. He was like, I am accused of this office. This is the new answer to can you host is, well, I am an intern
I'm a Senate intern.
at the Senate. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that so much. I've been attacked for who I love. Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. He walked it back with this like very like Hillary Clinton love is love sort of thing. In staying on theme with like sexual and kink, what some people would like to be outcasts in the community and something that stirs discourse every single year, I want to talk a little bit about the Folsom Street Fair. Devin, what is Folsom?
Folsom is an annual street fair in San Francisco, and it is cordoned off. It's outside, but it's adults only, and videos from it constantly get reproduced with people intentionally excluding the fact that it's adults only and not mentioning that. But it is a big kink event where there are demos on, flogging and leather. There are people having sex in the street. There's people in fursuits having sex, wandering around, selling kinky wares. And yeah, it's just a big celebration of queer and kinky sexuality out in the open, but only for adults.
Yes, it's in the open. It's a street fair, but it's in a cordoned off area where there are no children. There are no children. You are ID'd to attend this event. And like you said, every year there is media that circulates the internet from Folsom and goes to places where it was just never intended to go. For example, like last year during Folsom, there were two things that I really remember. One was a guy getting fisted in a street, and then the other was a guy like smeared shit across, I think, his chest and his back. And what's interesting is I don't even know that that was a fetish thing. I actually think it was a political thing because apparently the motivation behind doing that was to make a statement about not wanting to be touched, which I think as a piece of like performance art at a sexual street fair is really interesting. But both of these things went totally nuts on Twitter. There was so much discourse of like, especially from younger queer people, of like, how are we ever gonna stop the discrimination against us if this is how we behave? And then the second you say anything about like, well, this is sex negative, and this is a conservative talking point, there is this very knee-jerk response of like, I'm conservative because I don't want people to smear shit on themselves in the street. There's this very kind of like heated debate that takes place around how people are supposed to behave and like what constitutes a conservative talking point. I want to appeal to younger queer people here, because I came out when I was 15, and I remember for the first at least like 4 years of my being out, I clung pretty tightly to this like, well, I'm not that type of gay sort of thing, which is amazing because now, fucking look at me. I lost it somewhere. As it turns out, I am that type of gay. But I spent my whole life feeling like the outcast and feeling like the person who could never fit in and feeling like the faggot. And all I wanted for myself was just to feel like the normal one for once. When I see people react to something like Folsom this way, a part of me identifies with them because I had years where I would have reacted the same way.
First, I think it's great that you bring up like why you had your own reservations about this stuff. I think it is very normal. First of all, because being queer is so shame-ridden in society, and any more deviance on top of that, kinkiness, gender deviance, whatever, it's so shamed. A lot of us feel really ashamed of what might be like lurking under the door, or like trapdoor if we open it up and find out what it is that we're into. It's also true that when you're a young queer kid, you're just coming into your identity and sexuality, and sex can be very scary and can be very dangerous. It can feel that way. And so we often, I think, do have this like self-protective impulse at that age of, this is too much for me. I don't want to look at this. I feel uncomfortable. But just because you're not ready for something yet doesn't mean that it shouldn't exist or that it's bad and damaging and all of these things. And we, especially in America, have this big problem of like moral puritanism, where if something is disgusting, we assume that it's wrong. So shit on the chest, if you're not into shit, this must be morally wrong. Instead of just being like, oh, that's not for me, yikes, I'm gonna look away. In the same way that we treat annoyingness as like a sign of immorality or somebody's doing something wrong. And cruising and kinky sexuality, it's always been so integral to gay history and queer liberation. I was reading this amazing book, Cruising, An Intimate History of a Radical Pastime by Alex Espinoza, and he goes into how cruising existed even in ancient Greece, how there was cruising.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. Yeah, they were getting into it. Like, there was graffiti from back then about, like, for, like, cavernous bottom, call this person, like, go to this house.
A cavernous bottom?
Yeah.
Looking for a
Or,
cavernous
like,
bottom on Grindr.
and he talks about how in like aristocratic like France and stuff, like the police were like trying to shut down cruising and like glory holes and public restrooms where people would have sex in like the 1600s and the 1700s, and how every time the police tried to crack down on it, that just made more people aware that it was a thing. So like when they would pass a law that was like, no having sex in this public restroom in the park, all of the queer people in like France would be like, wait, you mean people have been having sex in this park? I'm gonna go there. Like being repressed and then resisting the laws or resisting the standards of propriety, that's like how we find each other. Like being queer was so unspeakable for the longest time that it was criminalized, it was a mental illness, it was repressed as this evil, disgusting like threat to public life. And it's when we get demonized in that way and we try to push against it, that's how we even find out who we are. Like being queer is almost definitionally being told that you're wrong and saying, no, I'm going to choose not to believe that. I've been told all of these things about me are wrong, and I'm going to actually I'm going to own this, I'm going to own these slurs, I'm going to own these labels, I'm going to dress myself in this outfit that might scare some people or might be really transgressive and sexual, and that's how I'm going to find the other people like me.
Yeah. And look, we're not saying that if you see a video of someone getting fisted in the street and are repulsed by it, I'm not saying that that's your first step into your journey that ends with you getting fisted in the street. I'm very well aware not everyone wants to get fisted in the street, not everyone wants to have shit smeared on them, and that is perfectly fine. I personally, let's keep me out of this. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Devin, but I think what we're getting at is like, you're being uncomfortable with something does not make it morally wrong and does not mean that it is harm.
And it doesn't mean that it's being forced on you. It goes back to Ariel Scarcella. Like, her first, like, transphobic videos were saying, people are trying to force me as a lesbian to have sex with people with a penis. It's that don't shove it in my face thing, right, all over again. And somebody just being, in that case, a trans lesbian, doesn't mean you're being forced to have sex with anybody. And consenting adults fisting each other or wearing a fursuit and having sex at an 18-plus event, again, isn't anybody forcing you to do anything you don't want to do. Like, you might feel scandalized, you might feel uncomfortable, you might want to look away and not be there. That's fine. It's okay to be a gay normie or whatever. It's okay to be vanilla.
You can
know?
be Pete Buttigieg.
Yes, you can. You can be the most boring dude in the world, and that's fine. You're still part of us. And, like, I don't understand why that nuance is so hard for people. I feel like a lot of people just need to, like, take 5 deep breaths and say, okay, I'm not under attack right now just because I'm uncomfortable. And, yeah, again, even if you're never going to be the person who wants to get fisted or, like, you know, do suspension play or whatever, just ask yourself, what about myself am I ashamed of? What about me? What hidden things behind the trapdoors would other people look at me that way? Or I'm worried about people seeing me that way. And, like, how can you give yourself some of that self-compassion and get over that a little bit? And then maybe you won't feel so threatened by other people being freaks and perverts and wild and annoying and whatever else it is.
Yeah, and I mean, with this whole thing of like, oh, well, look at these videos of someone getting fisted in the street, like, they're going to take our rights away because of this. Honey, they are taking our rights away. They're taking our rights away whether you give them a video of someone getting fisted in the street or not. Because you know what? If they don't have a video of someone getting fisted in the street, they just make shit up anyway. Like, the biggest things that right-wing media as a whole latched onto over the last couple of years aren't fulsome. They're not even the Senate twink. They're like made up shit that Libs of TikTok puts out about like random queer people just like existing in public teaching positions or whatever. They will find whatever they want to find in order to discriminate against us. It's not this just world theory.
People who say this stuff, I wonder what they even want. Like, if Folsom, if an 18-plus cordoned off event isn't acceptable, then is like a private dungeon in somebody's house unacceptable? Like, again, I just remember like the early 2000s and just how overtly homophobic that era was as a queer teen at that time. And we're back there again, where like the people protesting at the pride parades back then, and I'm sure many places still are, they would have signs that would say things like, this is like one that I actually saw back in the day, eating shit is not a human right. They were treating gay men having sex as if it was the most vile, fetishistic in their mind, right? Like, those things are linked. Like, that it was the same thing as the guy with the shit on his chest. Yeah. So if they already see that way, we have to stand with the dude with the shit on his chest, you know? Like, maybe we want to keep our distance scent-wise, but like, he's one of us. He's our dude. Like, if he's not free, we're not free.
I want to give baby gays, as I've attempted to do throughout, this conversation, just as much grace as possible, because I really understand why respectability politics, I understand why that's an attractive mindset, especially, if you've lived your whole life in fear. And so I was like perusing Reddit, and I found this person, Reddit user Lauren M., who wrote something that I thought really gave grace to this idea in a beautiful way. They wrote, making yourself smaller is a dysfunctional fear response that people cling to as a result of abuse, in an effort to make the abuse stop. It doesn't work. It never has, and it never will. It is, in fact, just the victim perpetuating the abuse on themselves. All we have is each other. Don't let them use divide and conquer while dangling a reward you'll never get. I think that was really beautiful.
That is beautiful. I love the last line. Like, the reward of cishet approval, it is not worth it. That's the kind of stuff that keeps us in the closet. We have to dream past that.
I want to wrap up today's episode by reading a portion of an essay that I clipped together from Tumblr. It's by a Tumblr user called VA Spider, and this essay went viral some time ago when it was published. It's called Pete Buttigieg is Just a Faggot. So here it is. Pete Buttigieg is just a faggot. It's very important to me that younger queers understand this. To the people who you're trying to be more respectable for when you say things like neo-pronouns set the trans movement back, or you're why the cis-hets don't accept us, or including asexuals or bi people with the wrong kinds of partners, or non-binary people, or kinksters, or non-passing trans people, or furries, or polyamorous people just hurts us. Can't you wait until we get all of our rights before we talk about some of yours? To those people, Pete Buttigieg is just a fag. On Sunday night at Pride Northwest, some kids, late teens, early 20s, asked us what our I survived Reagan for this button meant. All of the queer adults at the tables making up our ad hoc counter looked at each other and sighed a little. Emmett and another adult started to explain the way the Reagan administration handled, or didn't handle, the beginning of the AIDS crisis. How many people died, how much we were ignored, the Ashes action, the Time magazine article which explicitly blamed bisexual men for passing the pandemic to the cishet community, playing on all the worst stereotypical bullshit. The way that even when the CDC started paying attention, they were so focused on gay men that they ignored AIDS in the lesbian community, leading to the, quote, women don't get AIDS, they just die from it poster, and so on. That's what I need you to understand. The people for whom you are folding yourself into smaller and smaller boxes will never see you as anything but a freak, a queer, a fag. Never. These are the people who will stand by and let you wither away and die alone, gasping for breath in a cinderblock room and not even claim your ashes, and they will say you deserve it because of your lifestyle. If they speak of you at all, it will be by the wrong name with the pictures you hate the most. They will curse at your lover, throw him out of the home you shared, and steal the gift you gave last Christmas to throw it in the trash just so he can't have it, and they'll say Jesus loves you while you do it. They'll feel good and righteous and blessed and holy and pure for doing it. And for them, you spit in the eye of your sister. For them, you disavow your sibling. For their sake, you trim away bits of your heart and lace yourself up tight. Never too loud, never too queer, never inconvenient or embarrassing, never asking for too much. Pete Buttigieg is what happens when your boomer dad turns out gay. Middle America. Parents still married. Suburban sprouted. Valedictorian. Harvard educated. Rhodes scholarship. Military service. More power to him. I hope he and Chasten are very happy together. Genuinely, I do. You couldn't create a more respectable gay if you grew one in a lab run by concerned voter focus groups. But Pete Buttigieg is just a fad. That's the part you don't seem to get. When they abandoned us, they abandoned all of us. Rock Hudson was a beloved movie star and even personally friendly with that horrid pair of ambitious jackals, referring to the Reagans. Nancy Reagan refused to help him get into the only place in the world that could treat him at the time, and he died. It was 1985, 4 years after the CDC first released papers on what would eventually become known as HIV/AIDS, and 7 years after the first known death from an infection from HIV-2. Reagan hadn't even said the word AIDS by the time Hudson died. I need you to understand that if Pete Buttigieg is just a fag, if that human embodiment of a Wonder Bread, mayo, and Oscar Mayer bologna sandwich is not respectable enough for them, and he's not, then the rest of us have absolutely no hope of measuring up. Not even if we trim away every colorful, beautiful piece of our community. Not even if the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence vanish into the ether. Not even if we sacrifice the 5 elements of Vogue on the altar of white supremacist cis-het middle-class conformity. We can't trim ourselves down to something they'll accept. The only other option is radical acceptance of our queer selves. The only other option is solidarity. The only other option is for fats and femme queens and drags and kinksters and queers and zine writers and sex workers and furries and addicts and kids and the ones who can look us in the eye and see all of us to say we're here, we're queer, get used to it, just the way we did 30 years ago. It's revolutionary, complete, and total acceptance of our entire community, not just the ones the cis-hets can pretend to be comfortable with as long as we don't challenge them too much. Or it's conceding the shoreline inch by inch to the rising waters of fascism until we've got nowhere left to stand and some of us start drowning. That's it. Either it's all of us or it's none of us. Because if we leave the answer up to the Reagans of the world and all the people who enabled him in the name of lower taxes and Democrats who wring their hands, weeping, oh, I don't agree with it, but we'll lose the election if we fight it right now, the answer is none of us. The brunch gays can come too, I guess. I thought that was fantastic.
It's beautiful. It nails it. Fighting for acceptance in a unacceptable system isn't going to get us free.
Devin, thank you so much for being here today and for shedding your light on this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Matt. It's so nice to just be able to talk about this stuff. Yeah, this discourse about who's the acceptable target and who's the problem within our community, it's so much of our energy that we could spend on fighting our common actual enemy, and so it's really important to talk about.
Where can people find you? Where can people support your work?
Yeah, probably the best place is my Substack, so drdevinprice.substack.com. That's where you'll find the piece on annoying queers that we've been